All right. Let's see how this particular hand plays out. X-Men 97, The Dead Man's Hand. So, this one is not as interesting to talk about as the previous one because it's not dealing with as many, bigger concepts, like philosophical or sort of thought experiment kind of stuff, questions of morality or whatever. This is a much more straightforward, just narrative episode, which is fine. It's still a pretty decent one. And this one has us dealing with the consequences of what we saw at the very end of the previous episode, which is Remy, aka Gambit, coming back from the dead as Apocalypse's new Horseman of Death. So, there's a few things going on here that I do think are pretty well done. I'm going to say flat out that I'm not super familiar with the comic book source material in terms of what the comics did, because I know Gambit was the Horseman of Death at one point, but I don't know how that played out in the comics. So I don't know if this is representative of what was done there or if they kind of took it in a new direction. I can't really tell you. What I can tell you is whoever's idea it was, whether it was the comics or the folks behind this show, I feel like they might have come to a similar conclusion to me that Apocalypse himself is kind of boring. They're doing a lot to ensure that we get as little of him as possible. Like when we had the episode set in the future, he was like just this looming background threat. When we did the stuff set in the past, it was mostly him as Ensabanur. We had a very brief period of him actually as Apocalypse, and then dealing with him in the present, they're tracking him down, or in this case, finding his dead body. And he's still, he's not gone. They're kind of treating him a little bit like a lot of cosmic horror things would treat something like Cthulhu, which is that you don't just have him show up and start stomping through cities. That's kind of boring. That's not, that not to say that like Godzilla is boring, but like with the concept of what Cthulhu is supposed to be, reducing him to that is like, okay, whatever. So in a lot of cosmic horror stories, whatever the Cthulhu type threat will be, is something that is always in danger of happening. It's on the horizon. It's coming, but you're not actively fighting it the whole dang time, which is what they're kind of doing with Apocalypse. And this works a lot better. Like, I still think Apocalypse looks like, I don't like his final design, and I don't mean just in this cartoon. I've never thought his full design was particularly good. It works better on the comic book page than it does here, and definitely better here than in live action. But I've never super liked his look. I've always found him boring. That having been said, if he's gonna be around, this is a really good way to treat him, especially for somebody like me who will never get excited about him actually being on the screen. So the way they are continuing to sort of keep Apocalypse more or less backgrounded is here we have, so they try and sell initially that Remy actually killed Apocalypse, but had already been so tainted by the process that Apocalypse used to bring him back from the dead that he's, not really Remy anymore. He's still a massive danger. What we find out later is Apocalypse is basically taking him over, which it would be untrue for me to say I called, but I was not surprised by, because actually when we'd seen Apocalypse's body at the end of the previous episode, I did not assume Remy had killed him. I assumed that meant, he's in the new body that he's going to reshape to be, this thing again. When this episode started, I was like, they didn't do that. I guess they did have Remy kill him. And then when they revealed, no, that's not true, Apocalypse is in the back of his head, I was like, right. I should have called that based off what my first instinct was in the first place. So again, I didn't call it, but I was not surprised by it. Here's the detail that I really like. I like how much Remy still acts like Remy. So often in these kinds of stories, whether it's comics, whether it's cartoons, shows, movies, whatever, when you have a character taken over by this evil force, 99 times out of 100, they're just not the same person anymore. They don't act the same. They don't talk the same. They don't have the same personality, or if they do, it's so deadened that it barely counts, which like, it's for some reason it's always the first example that comes to my mind, but it's why I really hated when Agents of Shield not only killed the character of Ward, but had him possessed by Hive, which is just this boring, generic, freaking cosmic horror monster thing that they dragged down into a human form and just made boring. So it wasn't even interesting as cosmic horror, but you got rid of what I thought was one of the best and most interesting characters on the show and just had somebody else walking around in his skin. It never felt like him when he was possessed by Hive, because it's not. He was dead. And they don't do that here. They actually do a really good balance of like, okay, that fundamentally that feels like Remy, but like what he's doing is not what Remy would do. And it feels a lot more like it is, instead of going like Remy is gone and has been overridden, it's sort of approaching it a bit more like, okay, what if Remy was twisted into thinking this was a good idea to do? How would Remy then go about it? So you have him returning to New Orleans, contacting his own people, still wanting to get with Rogue, still being really charming. It's good touches. I like it. I also... Big shout out to Kurt. I love seeing Nightcrawler after getting mind whammied by Remy, basically solo the rest of the X team. So this is X-Men and X-Force there. He basically takes them on by himself and holds his own for a while, which is a wonderful reminder of not just how awesome Nightcrawler is specifically, but one of the things that I really like about X-Men when they're done well. Like, honestly, a little bit of a tangent. X-Men in specific is the reason I hate the concept of power scaling. I hate the idea that you could just break things down like, well, this character is more powerful than this character because their energy bolts do more damage or whatever the heck. I hate power scaling. I think it's so stupid because it's not about what your power is. It's about how you use it. And X-Men at their best are really good about that. It's part of why Kitty Pryde kicks ass. On paper, her power is walk through walls. When you see it used creatively, you're like, oh, dang, okay, I never would have thought of that. And that's actually really clever, or sometimes even kind of messed up in a good way. And similarly here with Nightcrawler and the teleport, like that short range teleport, especially if you can just snappy do it one after another, that is a powerful tool. Now, like, could he take down the entire team with that? No, but dang, he can keep them busy because it's not about how powerful he is, it's about how creatively he uses that power. So I loved that. That was great. The stuff with Gene Scott and Nathan Cable, it's okay. Like it works better for me than it probably would under any other circumstances because, reminder, I don't really like Cable. When they had him as a kid, and they do more emphasis on like before he becomes the big gruff, ends justify the means guy, then he can work quite well. And they did have some of that here. So that sort of carries over and gives me like some degree of investment in what we see here. But ultimately I am dealing with the big, boring guy who I don't like. So like that worked about as well as it was ever going to for me when Cable is like this, which is what he's always like, because I'm sorry, Cable's a really boring character. He just is. I don't find him interesting at all. I will be curious to see what happens with X-Force teaming up with X-Factor. I'm shocked it did not occur to me that they would do that. Like, I really should have seen that one coming, but like, that's a nifty idea, and I'm here for it. And yeah, it overall, in terms of an episode, bringing a character back from the dead, which again, I'm still not sure I would have advised doing. Again, yes, I know characters come back in the dead characters come back from the dead in comics all the time. X-Men in particular are notorious for that. Gambit has died and come back. Like, I understand all of that. It doesn't change my mind that it's generally a bad idea to do, especially when the death was as well done as it was with Remy, because that was a really phenomenal death. And I'm sorry, you take away some of the power of that when you bring him back. You just do. You do. If I ever go back and rewatch that episode of the first season, It'll still be beautiful, but it also won't hit me the same because I know he's coming back. So I don't care how much precedent there is in the comics. I still would have advised against doing that. But if you're going to do it, then this is pretty well handled. Which is honestly kind of the way that I end up approaching a lot of this show in specific. Because it is pulling from comics that are not always doing things that I like, I am often, well, not often, but intermittently stuck with plot points or directions or character choices that I'm like, I don't like that. Like, I get that there's precedent, but I don't like it. But they also still execute it very well. And it is a position that I find myself in semi-regularly where I watch something and I'm like, I'm not sure that was a good idea for you to do that. But if we just accept as a given that you were going to do that, then you did it pretty well. And I do think that is the case here. I'll be curious to see where we go from here in terms of level of threat. Remy himself has now just kind of been turned into more of a guy we have to save from apocalypse and ideally just keep him asleep. I kind of hoped, honestly, that they would have him continue to be the villain for more than one episode. But no, we're going to shift over to X-Factor and X-Force versus X-Men from the look of it, which, you know, again, that's a pretty solid thing to build to. So we'll see where we go from here. It's not amazing because it is, you know, just kind of doing the next major plot beat, whereas I tend to find the episodes that dig into some of the more complicated or more messy or more philosophical stuff, or at least find time to do that while they're, you know, shooting eye lasers and everything. I know it's not lasers, it's concussive force. Just let me ramble. So this doesn't really have that, but for what it does have, it's well executed and it tees us up for, hopefully, a good finale. I will definitely say at this point, this season has handled Apocalypse so much better than I was afraid, and they've done it by basically avoiding dealing with Apocalypse as much as possible, which I'm totally on board with. X-Men 97, episodes 7, 8? I don't know. Dead Man's Hand. That was the name of the episode. I remember that much. I'm now finally caught up on this. We're going to try and get things out more on my regular schedule, and maybe I'll even try and get to some other stuff now. I don't know. I'm honestly still recovering from having taken an extended vacation. But anyways, regardless, what did you think about this one? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills and enables me to do this as my living, even if you can't help me out that way. Like, share, subscribe. But don't worry too much about it. We take a relaxed attitude around here, so you can just come on back next time you need a break. And now to thank my highest supporting patrons: Robin Moore, Jared Boyce, Zubin Lupfula, Daphne Matthews, Kay Johnston, Auntie Kate 808, Mira G, Angry Casperl, Dave Hall, Snark Shark, Oliver B, Mystic Shadow, Sean Miller, Welsh Wrestling Geeks, Magdalena, Melissa Pedersen, Becky Sparks, Twilord, Tracy Scrabbit, Palba Rabajoggle, Sir Didymus is my favorite, and additionally from the lower tiers of support, I'd also like to thank Isabel Lovelace, Hey Chica, and Lee Campo. What are you guys doing? Oh my goodness, who's back there? Oh, Worm. Why do you do this? Ah!